Hey, Eric here, and I'm going to take 10 minutes or less around there to offer kind of an overview of my thinking in terms of the online teaching component of a hybrid course. The reason I'm doing this is, I don't know, a month or so ago, I emailed out to all the instructional deans um, offering my services to do some training for you as deans or for whoever you wanted about this issue of online teaching. And so Kim Dale has contacted me, and I've actually worked with one of our um, lead instructors who runs a hybrid program. And so we're really thinking about what online teaching in a hybrid class means. And I'm going to be meeting with all the Larimer deans here in a couple of weeks to kind of offer this overview. So I thought I'd go ahead and just do a screencast, send it out, and so if you're watching this, let me know if I can help you and follow up on this. Also, I'll just tell you, this is my take on hybrid quality and what I think should happen. I think it basically matches up with what our recommendations were on the task force. But of course, I know that we were only making recommendations, and it's completely up to you as deans to decide how to implement these issues on your campuses. Nonetheless, this is where I'm coming from, and if you want to follow up with me or if you want me to follow up with you, let me know. So first, I'm hitting this slide. This is the federal credit hour definition. And if you're interested in learning more about this, I don't know a ton about it, but if you just do a Google search for federal credit hour definition, you can see the way different schools have thought about it. My take on it is any school that gets federal financial aid is beholden to this definition. And the Higher Learning Commission's language is identical. So our Higher Learning Commission cites the federal credit hour definition when they're talking about our compliance. So this is the federal credit hour definition. A credit hour equates to at least 1 hour of classroom or instructor-directed teaching and a minimum of 2 hours of out-of-the-class student work per week for a 15-week class. And this matches up pretty well with what we've always told students in a regular 3-credit, again, my experience is typically with transfer 3-credit courses. How this impacts CTE courses, I'm not sure, but we still have this definition, and I think it still applies. But nonetheless, we tend to tell students for every hour in class, expect to spend 2 to 3 hours outside of class doing homework, and that matches up pretty well. I'll have you note that this model is based on face-to-face teaching, right, where there is live instructor-student mediated time every week. And the Higher Learning Commission and the Federal Credit Hour definition assumes that as the standard, right? So they specifically call out hybrid and online classes for added scrutiny. They're not asking us to prove that face-to-face classes have instructor-directed teaching. It's obvious face-to-face classes have it. They want to know, can we demonstrate that our online classes have the same quality and quantity of teaching and learning? And it applies to hybrid classes too. So I'm interested in this both as an online person and definitely because of my role in the hybrid task force. I'll also just say they don't define what instructor-directed teaching is. Again, I think they assume that what happens in a face-to-face class is teaching, and all kinds of things happen in a face-to-face class. So, I think my take on it is it's up to us to define for ourselves what we are counting as instructor-directed teaching that happens online, either in an online class or in the hybrid component, right, in the online component of a hybrid class. So, I have my own ideas about what I think constitutes online teaching, but I don't think that's up to me. I think each department or program may want to have this conversation. I'm guessing as deans, you're going to want to be able to say, can I be sure that these classes actually have teaching? So if the Higher Learning Commission comes and says, can you demonstrate, can you show me, can you provide evidence that your hybrid classes actually meet the federal credit hour definition, that we have something, right? A document that defines for a program what they're counting as instructor-directed teaching, or examples of hybrid syllabi that demonstrate it, or examples of the online component of a hybrid class where there's demonstrations of teaching. And aside, and I realize I'm almost 5 minutes in here, here's what a hybrid class isn't. It can't just be a face-to-face class with an online supplement. It has to be more than that, right? An online supplement is just a place to put content, a place for students to turn in homework, and maybe a place for instructors to hand back, right, to deliver back homework. But right, a face-to-face class can have that too. I think the difference between a face-to-face class with a robust course supplement and a hybrid class is that in a face-to-face class that doesn't give up any seat time, the teaching is clearly still happening in the face-to-face class. In a hybrid class, where's all the teaching happening? I'm going to pause. Okay, so my little diagram here. So I'm first focused here just on a traditional face-to-face class, and I'm using a 3-credit lecture class as my model, but I think it would apply to any kind of class. So for this typical 3-credit lecture class, the Higher Learning Commission Federal Credit Hour definition says there should be 3 hours of instructor-directed teaching per week. There should be an additional 6+ hours, right, of outside student work, 2+ hours outside of the class student work for every hour in class. And then there's this independent instructor work. Well, we know Front Range pays instructors and faculty for 6 hours of work per 3-credit lecture class. I mean, that's what I'm paid. That's what adjuncts are paid for. And I think the way we would cash that out is, 3 hours of what we're paid for happens live, right? That's the teaching. And then we pay people for prepping and grading and planning and all that stuff that happens outside of class. Now, of course, faculty will tell me, instructors, that this is ridiculous, that we clearly spend more than 6 hours, but this is the model, so maybe this should be 3+ hours. This clearly isn't more than 3 hours because this happens live, and this is variable. But this is that basic model. And I guess I'll add, we obviously think that this middle section here is really, really critical. A teacher might, if they run out of time, they might not do their grading. They might slack off on prepping, but they're not going to not go to class, right? I mean, I think most teachers and students think this is the most important part of a college class, right? That part that happens in the classroom, that instructor-mediated time, that student-teacher time, the facilitated time. I think that's what we wouldn't give up. And otherwise, we would just be an independent study college, right? I mean, so this teaching is critical. Obviously, the other parts are really important too, but this is critical. So in a traditional class, this is what happens in the classroom. So as an analogy or as a way to think about this, think about a flipped class. Same credit hours, same contact hours, same learning outcomes, same 3 hours of face time. So what is a flipped class? Some of the things that students used to do outside of the class, they now do inside of the class. For instance, maybe they used to do homework problem sets outside of the class, and now in the flipped model, they do the homework in class. So that probably means that instead of grading homework outside of the class, the instructor is doing formative assessment of homework in class. So that means what? Some of the stuff that used to happen here must happen out here. So students are watching online lectures. So a flipped class, I don't know exactly what it is. One of our colleagues said a flipped class is making students do the lecture at home and the homework in class, right? So whatever it is, it's rotating what used to be happening here and here into here. So hybrid class. Actually, let me skip hybrid, go to online. An online class, there is still independent student work. They're doing homework, they're reading, they're writing papers, they're still grading and prepping and planning. What is this? Now I'm teaching an online teaching workshop as part of a President's Innovation Grant right now, and the cohort of online teachers who are in this workshop, we are right now struggling with how do we define what online teaching is in our classes. So this line, since none of these boundaries exist, it is more difficult in an online class to distinguish independent instructor work from the teaching, right? Grading is really critical. Writing feedback is really critical. But does that count as teaching? Or is this more like facilitated discussions? Is this more like specific kinds of formative feedback that you give students via screencast? Is this some kind of mediated chat session? Is this a WebEx synchronous session? What's happening here, and how do we talk about this as teaching? And as an online coach, this is critical because the biggest problem in online learning is online instructors feel like they spend too much time. They report spending a lot more than 6 hours a week, yet our success rates are lower and instructor satisfaction is lower. And what's the biggest student complaint about online classes? There's no teacher there. So, I think identifying what online teaching is critical, so a teacher can tell students, in this class, this is what this is what counts as teaching. So this is where you'll see me. This is where I'm going to be exhibiting my instructor presence. I don't mean they'll talk about it in those terms, but by identifying what counts as this instructor-directed teaching online, we can try to make sure that the instructor is engaged and that students experience that engagement. So what is a hybrid class? Well, it's a class that officially designates part of the contact hours as happening online. So in my example here, I have a 50-50 hybrid. Instructors are still spending hours outside of class prepping. Students are still spending, outside of class hours doing homework and whatever they're doing here. So what is the instructor-directed teaching in a hybrid class? Well, our task force recommended that a hybrid class, the online part has to be more than content, right? It can't just be reading or a Dropbox to put homework in. It can't just be discussion forums for students to work in with no instructor facilitation, at least based on my reading of what the task force recommended. It has to be teaching, right? I mean, it has to be the equivalent of what was happening in that FaceTime. So again, I'm not sure exactly what that means or if it would mean the same thing for every discipline. But I think it has to be there. And so, one of the things Kim Dale has been asking me is, what kind of training might make sense for hybrid instructors? And, if you read I'm sure you did read, and you heard my report out on the hybrid task force recommendations, there was a variety of opinions on the task force about what kind of training we wanted hybrid instructors to have. And I was one of the people that argued that there is no part of online teaching that a hybrid instructor doesn't need to know. Because if half of your teaching, or a third of your teaching, or a quarter of your teaching is happening online, what part of online teaching do you not need to know about? It is just as critical. In fact, it may be more important, if only half of your teaching is happening online, that you capitalize on that online component and you make it really meaningful. I think it's also more difficult because these two parts have to complement each other, right? The teaching that happens online and the learning that happens online has to complement the stuff that's happening face-to-face and vice versa. So I'm already over. I'm 13 minutes in. But, this is the sort of thing that I think I might be able to help with. I don't want to dictate what kind of training people should have, but in terms of just conceptualizing what it might mean to have teaching in the online portion of a hybrid class, this is what I mean. So if you're interested, let me know, email me, and I'll be glad to talk to you more about this. All right, thanks.